In 2023, India became the fifth largest economy by surpassing the UK.
250 साल तक जो हम पर राज करके गए उनको पीछे छोड़ करके हम दुनिया की इकोनॉमी में आगे निकल रहे हैं.
And in 2025, it is all set to overtake Japan for the fourth place. Startups will be a core driver for India's economic engine, with contributions expected to become 4x this decade. And over the last few years, we've seen the emergence of some brilliant startups that are revolutionizing the market. Companies like Blinkit, Fittr, BlueSmart, Ather, they're all dominating their industries in some way or the other. Which begs the question, how did they get here? What offbeat tactics did they use to go head to head with the behemoths of India? This video is a short marketing and product masterclass on all the lessons that we have learned from these startups, from acquisition, retention, and monetization, and what you can implement in your business. So make sure you drop a like, subscribe to our channel, it helps us grow. And now let's perspectivify the shit out of this.
So over the past 1 year, I've personally learned a lot about acquisition in various businesses, right? From D2C brands such as Mokobara to a services business like Urban Company, right? And what I want to get out of this conversation personally are insights about how one can think about acquisition, right? And as you're a marketer, maybe you're at the right place to really collate these insights from all of these different businesses. For someone who's trying to start their own business or is trying to start their own digital business, about how to really think about acquisition.
Yeah, super. So I think the way I want to structure this conversation is largely in 2 or 3 parts, because over the course of the videos that we have done, we have obviously picked up different companies from different industries, right? And I think the best case study to start with is Urban Company, right? Because Urban Company is a classic example of how do you scale a multi-service business with the right marketing structure.
Yeah.
And I think the first question that both of us had was that if you have so many services, how do you exactly structure your marketing or your acquisition or your distribution, right? And when we spoke to the different teams from all these companies, I think that's where we learned a lot of things. Specifically in the case of Urban Company, what some of the marketing team told us is that the way they have built a framework for their marketing is that they do category-led marketing, which essentially entails the fact that you have these different category sets. So Urban Company has almost 100 plus services as far as I remember. But the interesting thing to note here, Rakshit, is that they have only 5 or 6 major categories that drive maximum amount of their growth, right? So from what I remember from our conversations, they have stuff like AC servicing, they have salon and beauty, cleaning, massage. These are some of their top categories. So what their team does, instead of trying to build ads for one service at a time, they figure out that, hey, if these are my leading services that are convincing my customer base of my brand quality, what I'll simply do is I will focus all my marketing on these couple of categories, and I will funnel in users who will ultimately become users of my other services as well.
Got
Right.
Got it.
One of the most interesting insights I had from their team was that AC servicing was actually the leading category. And what they did was they built an entire GTM strategy, a proper marketing strategy around AC servicing, right? For instance, okay, summertime is the main time where AC servicing is probably the most ubiquitous across the country, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
when they hit all, or they go all guns blazing, a lot of marketing around AC servicing. And what they essentially realize is that if I build out my marketing well for all these categories, people are going to funnel in, they're going to use my other services, referrals start
Yeah.
spiking, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Right?
Got
So
it.
I think the first thing here I would say is that the insight that I learned from this is that if you're building multiple lines of services or products, what you figure out is that after maybe some user research, what are my leading products that are convincing my users about my brand, and can I just double down on building marketing for those products, right?
Interesting. Interesting. I think this insight is essentially relevant for every marketer or product person who's sort of in this business of multiple categories where cross sell becomes the most important thing that you need to do for your business, right? If you have just one product or you have just one or two products, it's absolutely fine. You can just talk about that and focus on that, right? But if you have like hundreds of services, you just need to focus on these one or two top services, and you need to double down on them from an acquisition point of view.
Correct, correct. Uh, which is also a perfect segue into our next case study,
Right.
because I remember. So Mokobara is one of our top performing videos till date. It still is getting a lot of views every single day, and it's one of the same thing that Mokobara has also done. Because even if you think at it on a smaller scale,
Hmm.
Mokobara had like, I think, almost 10 or 15 different products. But if you know, like, the most common one that you see everywhere is that one. I forgot the. I think it's the traveler bag or something.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
that one bag with a yellow outline,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think they went very heavy on that, realizing how many of their customers actually coming through that.
Yeah.
And I think what we also learned from their team, if you remember this, was that once a customer buys a single bag of theirs, that's when they just buy, even, let's say, their luggage items for the airport, or any laptop bags, etc., etc., right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's a very common sort of strategy. But I think in the case of Mokobara, and another very, very big insight or very big strategy that I learned was that if you're building a big D2C brand, I think quick commerce marketing has been the standout distribution channel that
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
learned from every single case study till date.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're not doing quick commerce marketing, you should definitely be exploring that. And there's also more to that, because um unlike other platforms like an Amazon or a Google or a Meta, where you can do regular
Hmm.
conventional
Hmm.
advertising, what Blinkit or your Zeptos offer is a sort of a partnership at its core,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
you're not just advertising on the platform. Blinkit and Zepto, etc., are willing to actually promote your brand at a much larger scale. Like, just for example, when Mokobara launched its product on Blinkit, I think they also partnered with Albinder. Albinder also went out and posted Mokobara on his social media handles, and
Yeah.
Albinder's
Yeah.
social media handles are
Yeah.
obviously like one of the
Yeah.
most highly followed handles right now in the country.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, it's insane how much quick commerce has grown over the last year,
Yeah.
because it's practically become like the Apple and the Samsung of like the Western nations,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like,
Absolutely.
it's something to think about. But yeah, I think that's what's interesting. And obviously Blinkit launches Mokobara on their social media handles as well. It's like a entire campaign by itself.
So yeah, I think quick commerce is obviously the standout industry in general in the past 1.5 years, right? Uh, Another example, interesting example that we spoke about in our ice creams episode was that of GoZero, right? And I think that's where we need to really talk about the level of customization that you can do with a quick commerce brand, right? So what GoZero did was during IPL they launched an ice cream campaign with Zepto, where if you ordered above 500 rupees, Zepto would give you a free ice cream of GoZero, right? And it's unreal to really think about it that a big platform like Zepto is actually doing that with a small D2C brand like GoZero, right? You would never expect that to happen with an Amazon or a Flipkart. They're too big for you. But
Correct.
these platforms are relatively smaller, and there is a level of customization that you can do with them, which is impossible within Amazon. Similarly, I remember like I think during Diwali and even during New Year's and Christmas, Zepto launches these boxes which has like a bunch of different brands.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
every order above 500 or 1,000 rupees gets these things, and the user essentially is trying out your product firsthand, which is impossible to do in any other setting.
Yeah. And maybe one thing to note here is that I feel like it will hit saturation at some point, because the platform isn't going to keep um catering to these smaller incoming brands. Maybe they do it for a year, maybe two more. But I think if you want to build a business and if you want to scale D2C right now, definitely check out quick commerce. It's one of the most go-to platforms that is giving exponential growth to some of the brands we've personally studied, right?
Yeah.
And the third company that is doing very well on marketing front is Fittr. right? And although I haven't been a Fittr user, Rakshit has been a very strong advocate of the brand. Uh, on studying the brand is when I realized, sort of all the things they're doing right at this point in time. And one of the most prominent things that stood out for this company was the fact that they are scaling marketing at a zero CAC, right? Which is unheard of in today's day and age. In most cases, companies are not scaling brand at a zero CAC. Although they did run ads here and there, which I think now they have completely stopped, as far as Jitendra Choksi had posted, which is their founder. It's still a standout case study, right? Specifically, if you talk about what Fitter did right, it's the fact that they built an excellent community, right? And the community model has been something that is very few amount of brands have actually been able to build communities in India, especially because communities require a lot of resources, a lot of time horizon. Me and Rakshit know this very well because we started a community on Perspectify, I think, what, 8 months back, and we're still at, I'd say, 500 odd members. It's a good feat for us, but it's a very slow growth channel, right? But
Yeah.
the thing to note here is that uh, what communities build very well is, share of voice or top of the mind recall. Because if you keep popping up for your user base every single day, every single week, what you do is you become a small part of this user's life somewhere, right? So somewhere at
Yeah.
the back of their head it keeps coming up.
Yeah.
So in the case of Fitter, it was the fact that they had this small WhatsApp group that they initially started with, and this WhatsApp group ultimately, again, was to train
Yeah.
people, mentor people, eventually transform into this 1 lakh plus user base on different channels. If they are doing Instagram community, they're doing a, I think, an app community as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's it's a standard case study, because when you have such a large user base, referrals obviously spike. You're giving so much utility to your users. Hmm.
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 Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that's that's a super important and a
Hmm.
super interesting way to look at acquisition, right? Now coming on to the second point, which is from acquisition to retention, and I feel that this is the most important thing that a business can solve for, right? You can get all of these customers, but if you're not able to retain them for a very long period of time, it becomes a very big leaky bucket. And we have seen that companies that have actually succeeded in building 100,000 crore brand or a business have great retention metrics. So, for example, if you remember Blinkit, it has a 50% weekly retention rate,
Yeah.
which is unheard of,
Hmm.
right? Similarly, UC also has like a 50-60% odd weekly retention rate. Blue Smart is amazing. I think their monthly retention rate would be minimum 30-40%, right? These are
Hmm.
like unheard of metrics, and you really need to crack retention. So the reason why it's like super important is number one, is simply because based on your retention, you should actually measure whether you should acquire users or you should build your product. So let me explain that with the help of an example, right? uh, let's build like a 2 by 2 grid, right? On the y-axis you have the acquisition volume, and on the x-axis you have user retention, right? And if we divide both of these x and y axes into low and high, you ideally want to be in the high acquisition and high retention segment, right? What I mean by that is that with that, you can build companies like Blinkit, you can build companies like urban companies, and you can be sure that with every customer that you're adding, he's actually contributing to your top line and ultimately your bottom line, right? So there are multiple companies that have managed to stay on top of their retention metrics. But the way you really need to look at retention is ki bhai, what is my natural frequency of my product, right? A lot of people want कि यार मेरा जो product है वो daily खुलना चाहिए, या मेरा app जो है every day someone should open my app, right? Every day my user should open my app. But the reality is that natural frequency of a product can vary a lot. So if you're, let's say, a ride hailing app, it's okay if you think कि यार people will come onto my app every single day to book a ride, right? But let's say if you're an insurance business, right? you would essentially just buy a policy once, a health insurance or a life insurance policy only once. It's not expected that the user will come onto your platform every single day, right? So you need to build and think about your retention metrics in that respect, right? So I have three examples for everyone to essentially, and these examples will help you think about how to think about retention in your business, right? So I'll start with Blinkit. Everyone has spoken about Blinkit. They have, as I said, 50% weekly retention rate. And I think the way they're able to sort of think about retention is that, look, every dark store needs 1,000 orders per day for them to break even, right? In order to get to that number, what's the most important thing for Blinkit? It is to have the right SKUs at the right dark store, right? So every strategy that they have built is to basically have the right channel, no, sorry, the right product for that consumer, right? And because Blinkit is trying to target the top 1 to 2% of people, the only way to get to that break even number is to constantly drive value to these users. And what they sort of realized is that the only way people will come back to Blinkit is because people will find even the smallest of the things in their dark store or their platform, right? So there was this story a couple of years back in which Albinder said that suddenly they started getting a lot of orders of cow dung, right? And
Hmm. Hmm.
he was like shocked कि यार why are people searching for cow dung? And what he realized was कि यार people want cow dung because of this during Diwali because of some kind of a puja, right? And this is
Hmm. Hmm.
especially in the North Indian household, right? And that's when he realized कि यार we need to keep all of these things dynamically according to festivals, according to different parts of the year, to essentially just serve our users well. Oh, and
Yeah.
one of their best products that they've built is search, because the moment
Hmm.
they see that there are a lot of searches happening and they're not serving that demand, they know कि यार मेरे को सेक्टर 65 या सेक्टर 67 के डार्क स्टोर में आई नीड टू कीप these couple of things in order to serve this unmet demand.
One small point to add here, which again is just a personal theory, but I feel like retention also comes a lot with the line of business you're in, right?
Yeah,
Because a Blinkit has a lot of auto retention in the sense that
yeah,
the way the business is built, it's like people will keep coming. It exploits a big psychological tactic of convenience,
yeah.
right? So what I also feel is what someone maybe needs to balance is that, although I know you said that a high acquisition, high retention strategy is like obviously this is the best case scenario. But let's say if you have a high retention, or let's say if you have a low retention rate, right? Let's
Hmm.
say in the case of insurance, for example,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You have to be able to build a very heavy acquisition model. Or
yeah,
in a reverse case where a business has, let's say
yeah,
very high acquisition, maybe retention does not become a very important metric, or vice versa, right? So I think
yeah.
it really boils down to where you fall in which business and which line of growth you probably need to work on, obviously, but either way you should work on both the aspects as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think this is where I sort of differ, and I'll take an example of, let's say, Ather, right? Now,
Hmm.
when you think about Ather, right, it
Hmm.
sells electric scooters, right? So you
Right.
wouldn't really think कि यार they think about कि यार मेरे को retention increase करना है, and people would
Hmm.
you these companies, these electric scooter companies would want कि यार लोग मेरे पास ना आए. But what Ather has done like pretty beautifully as
Hmm.
is that they've
Hmm.
built this strong community model, right? What I mean by
Hmm.
that is that the moment you buy an Ather scooter, you're part of this big community of Ather, right?
Yeah.
And whatever problems that you might have, या आपके कुछ भी हो गया, मतलब आपका स्कूटर चलना बंद हो गया, या you want to be part of some kind of a meetup or
Hmm.
something of that, they've built this
Yeah.
beautiful community that you can access, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty smart strategy, because you may think that what is this driving? What kind of a business is this driving? But the reality is that number one, you're on top of the mind, you have massive top of the
Hmm.
mind recall for all your
Yeah.
existing user base, right? And with Ather, what you'll realize is कि यार they have a lot of after sales services or
Hmm.
accessories that they want to sell. They just
Yeah.
released their helmet, right? So the moment you release these kind of a thing, because you're on top of the mind of these consumers, you can just sell them all kinds of, upsell them with all of these things, right? Similarly, if your business is, let's say, of a very low natural frequency, let's say you think about insurance once a year, or you think about credit once a year, but let's say by sending your users some kind of a newsletter or some kind of an information which is valuable to them every single time, every single day or every single week, that just helps them be on top of the mind that in case I want to buy this loan, I will go to this company and get this loan from. So I think that is a pretty interesting way to think about retention, at least. And finally, let's move on to monetization, right? With monetization, I think what becomes interesting is that, there are two kinds of businesses, right? So you have the likes of Mokobara, or you have the likes of Family, in which monetization kind of comes inbuilt, right? Because you buy that product, if you have done the right, if your product is right, you buy that product, Mokobara gets the money, right? But if you're building a digital platform or a digital business, this becomes slightly more difficult, or this becomes slightly more tricky, right? And even though we have talked about consumer app monetization in very detail in one of our videos, we'll still talk about it very briefly over here, because I think it's very important for someone who wants to build a 100 crore business, right? So if you have a digital platform or a digital business, there are three ways in which you can essentially monetize your business. The first one is ads, the second is subscription, and the third is micropayments, right? With ads, obviously it's a no-brainer. If you have like a large user base who are coming onto your platform, it's an $8 billion industry, growing at approximately 16 to 18% annually. Huge growth over there, right? And if you have like a transactional led business like Zomato or Blinkit, they are essentially, or even Amazon for that matter, these guys are just heavily growing, growing their top line or bottom line through with the help of ads, right? But if you have like a pretty large user base, there is some scope that you can do for advertising. For example, what Sharechat did with the tier 2 model, in which they sort of became the social media for Bharat, right? And with their vernacular content, they were able to serve ads, and currently they have approximately 350 million monthly active users across ShareChat and Moj, and 60 to 70% of their revenue is coming from ads. So yeah, I think the only problem with an ad-led business, at least in India, is that the CPCs are extremely low, right? So it's hard. It's very hard to build a sustainable business in India just through ads, right? We have seen, unfortunately, the likes of Coup, which have gone bankrupt because they've just focused on advertisement, right?
I think it's not more of a question of the low CPCs. It's that you need to be pulling in the volumes
Yeah,
in India to be able to have the ad strategy. ShareChat managed to do it because of their massive user base and the massive returning user base. But it's yeah. I mean, to be honest, it's more of a balancing act between the sort of revenue and are you generating so many users on the platform, because that's
yeah,
how it works for Instagram. That's how it works for Twitter, because they're growing at that exponential base every single year,
yeah.
right?
Correct,
So
correct. Yeah, yeah. The second growing pool is subscriptions, right? And the this revenue pool is approximately $2.45 billion, growing at 18 to 22%. Uh, and the top five players are basically owning 50% of this revenue pool currently, right? But what I want to tell to users out there is that you can still build a very sustainable revenue led business which is subscription based. We have seen the likes of Fittr, we have seen the likes of Stage, who have managed to crack this and are doing phenomenally well, both in OTT, in an OTT space and a non OTT space, right? And I think these businesses are like, you just need to think differently from the top players, right? Uh, Third and finally is the micropayments business, right? This business is growing phenomenally well, right? Currently, it's just valued at 500, and the revenue pool is just $550 million, but it's growing at 25 to 30%. And there are companies like PocketFM which have taken this business to the next level, right? They have gone international and they're just minting money as of this point in time. And it's just with their like 10-minute, 15-minute audio series in which there is some kind of a cliffhanger where the user needs to pay just 50 rupees, 100 rupees, which is very simple or very easy for someone to do, at least in India and abroad, right? So
the
you
the odd insight with Pocket FM, and it's still I'm still mind boggled by it, is that I think almost 60-70% of the user base actually, or the revenues, is now generated abroad, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And the fact, I mean, it's a very intriguing sort of problem, or not even, I won't say problem, but like but an insight. But also at the same time, what we need to realize is that I think in Western nations, the cost of content, or cost to consume content like Netflix, etc., is much higher, right?
yeah,
So microtransaction businesses become a lot more convenient for users abroad, right?
yeah,
In India, maybe not that much the case, but I think for people in the US, I think is one of their dominant markets right now. People are more than happy to pay like $1 extra just to access more content than to pay, I don't know, a lot more for a Netflix subscription,
yeah, yeah,
right?
absolutely. And I think one another example for micropayments is a company that everyone is very intrigued about, but everyone kind of hates on them for some reason, and it's AstroTalk, right? AstroTalk is generating almost like 1,000 crores in revenue as of this point in time, which is unbelievable. A lot of their revenue is actually coming from international markets, right? So they've expanded to US. A lot of NRIs are using this. Funny fact, a couple of years back, I remember reading this somewhere that an NRI woman paid 35 to 40 lakhs to AstroTalk just to, because she was constantly addicted to this platform, which is like
Do you
unheard
feel
of.
like do you feel like it's because they have in like Indians are not in touch with the culture abroad, so like the most easy access route is like through like an astrology, astro talk sort of route, but I don't know, that's
I
just
I
speculation.
I think her ex left her, so she just wanted
and
to know
and
where.
uh, yeah, probably that, but also I feel like NRIs mint a lot of money, so that's like a
Yeah,
very big
yeah,
bigger reason, so Indian
yeah. I
business
mean,
become a lot cheaper for them,
yeah, I mean,
right?
35
So
to 40 lakhs is what, $20,000, $30,000. If a person is maybe making like $200,000, it's just 10% of their salary, right?
So that's a wrap on today's episode. We spoke about acquisition, we spoke about retention, we spoke about monetization, and hopefully you've learned a bunch of things that might assist you in building your own business. And at Perspectify, we obviously said this in the video, but we run a very interesting community called the Perspectify community. It's a 500-member group, almost. We post a lot of insights daily, have a lot of interesting discussions and debates. So make sure you join that. The link is in the description box below. And make sure you drop a subscribe if you like the video. That's it from our end. Take care. Have a good day. Bye bye.